This lesson, we'll be looking at heretical religions. These are religions based on a corrupted, essential Christian doctrine. This is part 3. In this part, we'll be looking at modern Judaism, Judaizers, Gnosticism, the Nation of Islam and Five Percenters, the so-called Hebrew Israelites, Rastafarianism, Islam, Druze, and finally, Baha'i faith. If I pronounced that wrong, sorry to anyone in that religion or who knows how to pronounce it. So first, for this part, we'll look at modern Judaism, which in actuality is a schism off of Christianity, not the other way around, because Christianity, the New Testament, is a fulfillment of the Old Testament. So if you reject the New Testament, then you're ultimately rejecting the Old Testament, whether you believe it or not. Modern Judaism believes in the original tenets of Judaism, except for anything that concerns Jesus, of course. And they believe that the first coming is supposed to be like how the second coming will actually be. Jesus being this, well, the Christ being this earthly conqueror establishing his own, earthly government. No, that's later. Heresies, obviously, are Jesus' Christhood denial, and hypostatic union heresy through Jesus' divinity denial, which means they ultimately reject the Father instead of worshiping him like they say they do, in accordance with Luke 10:16. And of course they believe in works righteousness, Old Testament version. Next are the Judaizers, which was started by a group of Israelites during the first century. They're not really around anymore, but their ideas still persist. And they were even referenced in the New Testament every time in one of the Pauline epistles, Paul is talking about circumcision and how it's unnecessary for salvation. That was just really just a pointless symbol. That's him referencing the Judaizers because they seem to have basically a personal vendetta against them. And we'll get more into that in a second. Judaizers, they claim that one must enter the Old Covenant before entering the New Covenant, mainly with circumcision. They said that, sorry, before you can be saved by Christ through faith in him, you gotta get circumcised and enter the Old Covenant and so forth. So yeah, again, every reference to the necessity of circumcision, or really unnecessity of circumcision, in the New Testament, it is referencing this group. So obviously their heresy is works righteousness, Old Testament version. Next is Gnosticism, which the religion itself is not really still prominent, but their theological teachings are. Agnosticism is a group of first century loosely connected sects. I put the emphasis for a reason, you know why. That are mainly united in their focus on gnosis over doctrine. Excuse me. They believe that matter is itself evil, which I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. The Gnostics also forged false scriptures such as the infancy gospels. So if you ever hear of like the Gospel of Barnabas, or the infancy gospels like the Gospel of Thomas or the Gospel of Philip, do not believe them for 1 minute. These are obvious forgeries that have been disproven for centuries. Obvious forgeries. And they're also what the Da Vinci Code is entirely based on. Yes, the Da Vinci Code, though proclaiming to be true, is entirely based on knowingly falsified documents. You're a real genius, aren't you? And again, though the religion is mostly dead, their ideas still influence the world today. The heresies that they teach are Christological heresies such as Docetism, which is not all but some, and they believe in Docetism because they believe matter to be evil. So according to them, if matter is evil, then God cannot take on matter, i.e., flesh. And then there are other crucifixion, resurrection denials that they'll believe in, or other hypostatic union heresies like denying Jesus' divinity. Again, these are very loosely connected groups that vary in their theology. Some even teach polytheism, believing that there is a malevolent deity along with the benevolent deity of God. And as the name suggests, they believe in gnosis salvation. And again, they emphasize gnosis, divine enlightenment, over doctrine, which really, divine enlightenment you cannot prove. Doctrine you can prove through reading scripture, which proves why Gnosticism is false. And so are all of their teachings, and as well as the Da Vinci Code. It's the Nation of Islam, which has essentially nothing to do with Islam, and the Five Percenters. The Nation of Islam itself teaches that God made himself out of the blackness of space, and that 12 black scientists and certain people on Earth, like Wallace Fard Muhammad, pictured to the right, take turns being God. Keep in mind this is immensely generalized, summarized statement. For the details, go look at Cody Baucham's video where he goes over the details of their theology, which I have linked in the description. And please, I do encourage you to do that if you want to understand their theology. The 5 percenters themselves, aka the 5% nation or nation of gods, which they call male members, and earths, which they call female members, are a schism from the Nation of Islam that reject Wallace Fard Muhammad as God and say that they're the 5% of enlightened people trying to enlighten others, hence the name. Heresies they teach are polytheism, teaching that all black people are divine, and they say that the more melanin you have, the greater divinity you have. It's like, say, somebody who's Indian, they have some divinity, but not as much as like somebody from Africa. And they teach discrimination theology, that all white people are demonic, and some teach anti-Semitism. Yeah, the teaching that all white people are demonic. Look at that picture of Wallace Fard Muhammad. And remember, the Nation of Islam says that he is an incarnation of God. Yeah, that's why the 5 percenters reject him as God, because they're more consistent. Then they also teach the heresy of an uneternal God. Remember, they say God made himself out of the blackness of space, and they teach gnosis salvation. Next are the so-called Hebrew Israelites, which, one, very misleading name, two, they also go by various variations of this. They include groups such as Nation of Yahweh, which is the most extremist group out of them all. Then there's also the Church of God and Saints of Christ, or something Church of God and Saints of Christ. There are various groups with Israelite or Ethiopian in the name. There's also the Church of the Living God, and the Pillar Ground of Truth for All Nations. Keep in mind, this is a greatly varying group, so if you encounter any of them, if you encounter them multiple times, do not assume that the next one will be like the last one. Almost assume it will be different, especially if you are far away from your original encounter. Though they do all believe that Africans, though some, depending on who you ask, will add in Amerindians and Latinos, are descendant of lost tribes in Israel and are the rightful heirs to the promise, or at least co-heirs with the true Israelites, or according to them, fellow Israelites. Now they have various views on scripture. Some say the Pentateuch only, some say the 66 only, some say the 66 and Apocrypha, and some say the 66 minus Pauline epistles. But no matter what group you come across, they are all King James Version only, or at least essentially all of them. So keep that in mind. If you quote from NIV, NLT, ESV, so on, they are probably not going to listen to you at all. Excuse me. Heresies that are taught by them, some of them namely the nation of Yahweh and others, teach discrimination theology through saying that, well, through black supremacist anti-Semitism, saying that the Semitic Israelites, i.e., the true Israelites, the real descendants of Israel, and therefore Abraham and therefore Shem, not Ham, have usurped the promise from them. Yeah, that kind of belief will kind of make you hate people, which is ridiculous and false. Sorry, but it's true. Most of them, though I do not believe all of them, deny Jesus' divinity, and all of them teach works righteousness Old Testament version. They all put a heavy emphasis on following the ceremonial law, which, relates to their name, Hebrew Israelites. It's, their main thing, claiming to be Israelites. And again, remember, not all of them are racist, but they still don't have a focus on or clear understanding of the essentials of Christianity. So, like, even if they're not a racist group of Hebrew Israelites, even if they just seem like all they're trying to do is just connect with their believed Israelite roots, still don't understand the gospel, so they still need evangelized too. They still need help with that, no matter what group, no matter what variation. People need help. Let's reach out and help them. And when you do, if you do, a strong warning. You're going to want to be well versed in Hebrew and African, Israelite, and Bible canon history. Because unlike most other religions, every single member of this religion makes it their job to be a top apologist of it. So, like, if you go to evangelize these people, I'd strap on some armor and grab the sword that is the Word of God, because they are ready to defend their faith. Metaphorically, they are ready for a fight. Next is Rastafarianism, or simply Rastafari. They believe that this man, who was emperor of Ethiopia, I'm not going to try and pronounce his name. One, out of respect, and two, I don't think I can even get close, so why bother? They believe that he was the second coming, or at least a great prophet. It depends on what Rastafarian you ask. But again, either way, they have a high regard for this man. And they view Jamaican cultural practices like cannabis smoking as sacraments in what they refer to as, I think I'm pronouncing this right, lividity or livity. Livity, that's probably it. I'm not going to go into detail on this. If you have come across Rastafarians or think you might, I suggest going to other sources to get a detailed description on them. They also believe that Jah, i.e. God, is in everyone, and so that is what they actually mean by I and I. So if you ever hear a Rastafarian say I and I, what they're saying is I meaning God and I meaning myself together. Because again, they say that God lives within everyone. Some of the heresies they believe in, as alluded to, they believe in a false second coming. Some of them, not all of them, because again, some only believe he was a great prophet, but still. Some believe in discrimination theology through black supremacy, though this is fairly uncommon amongst them. Please keep that in mind. Obviously, they have arbitrary sacraments. All they did was just take Jamaican culture and turn it into sacraments. Because cannabis smoking existed in Jamaica long before Rastafarianism. So, I mean, honestly. And they're essentially panentheists, because again, they believe God is within everyone, which also could be considered deification. Though I'd admit not quite. Next is Islam, which actually was called a heresy of Christianity by Christians during the time of its founding and its initial flourishing. It was founded by a man who was honestly a pervert. Go look up his history. I am not claiming this on merely my own opinion. It is historical fact. Again, check it out for yourself if you don't believe me. I'm not asking you to take my word on this. Islam is founded by Muhammad, who 500 years after Jesus claimed that Jesus' disciples lied about Jesus. And even though Muhammad did not understand Christianity at all, for example, he claimed that Mary was part of the Trinity and claimed that that the Trinity is pagan and tritheist, which many Muslims will still claim today. Muhammad, claimed, though not understanding Christianity, claimed that all the disciples lied and were wrong about Jesus, and Muhammad rearranged some of the New Testament concepts into a pro-Islam version. So for example, instead of the remnant of Israel at the end times, they, we're all Christian, we're all Israelites will become born again Christians. He said that the second coming, Jesus will come down and then convert all the Christians to Islam. So as you see, all this guy did was just take the New Testament and make it his own. There are many more examples of him doing this. That's just merely one. And the Quran that he wrote, which he claimed was divine revelation given to him by an angel to set all the Christians straight, even though he didn't understand Christianity at all. The Quran is filled with many contradictions. One place says that yes, the Christians and Jews are our friends, states that clearly. And then another statement states clearly, even in context, that you should hate Christians or at least do not be friends with them. Any Muslim that disagrees with me on this, I accept that you disagree with me. Though I have read the Quran myself, I understand some of its major contradictions. And again, that's not even the only contradiction in it. That's just that is a minor example of the contradictions within the Quran. Please go look at the sources linked in the description. Islam teaches the heresy and the anti-Trinitarian heresy of Jesus' divinity denial, though they do accept that he's the Messiah. So, that warrants considering them a heresy of Christianity because we believe Jesus is the Messiah as well. So, they're not a separate religion. They're not a mere separate religion. They are a direct heresy of Christianity. They are a perversion of Christianity. They also deny the bodily crucifixion resurrection. They claim that the resurrection never happened, even though the tomb's empty, and claim that Christ was not crucified, but instead one of his disciples, some Muslims will say Judas, was made to look like him, though some will say actually it was a disciple who was willing to be crucified, was made to look like him, and was then crucified in his place. Again, explain the empty tomb, though, please. And Islam also teaches works righteousness. They claim anyone who does the will of Allah will be saved, and they say that includes Christians, even though Christians do not do the will of Allah because we contradict the Islamic teachings of Allah. We say that God has a son. The Quran says Allah has no son. And Muhammad claimed that we are idolaters who worship our monks and our saints and worship Mary. No, we do not. We worship the triune God who is one deity. We are a monotheistic religion. We do not worship Mary. Worshipping Mary is a heresy, which I pointed out in my lesson on other theistic and Christological heresies, which if you did not watch before watching this video, you may be confused. Next are the Druze. They're a schism off from Shia Islam and are quite separate from Islam. Their heresies are hypostatic union heresy through denial of Jesus as the incarnation. Instead, they believe that this man is the incarnation instead. I'm not going to try to pronounce his name. 1, out of respect. 2, out of I really don't want to even try. They also believe in syncretism through combining ancient Greek philosophy, the Bible, the Quran, and Gnostic writings. And other false beliefs they believe in are reincarnation, which obviously makes them quite a distinction from Islam. Now for our final heretical religion of this three-part series is the Baha'i faith, which I may be pronouncing wrong, and if so, I'm sorry. They believe that Abraham, Krishna, Zoroaster, Moses, Buddha, Jesus Christ, Muhammad, the Bab, which I may be pronouncing wrong, and Bahula, which I believe I'm pronouncing right, are manifestations of God, and these specific 9 because each of them are considered by the Baha'i to be founders of the major religions. And they say that each of them are a manifestation of God giving a different piece of progressive revelation. So, like, God comes as Abraham, gives some divine revelation, and then Krishna comes as a manifestation of God and adds to that, so on and so forth. Before we get into their heresies, I'd like to address this idea real quick. One, as I already said, it's these 9 because they're called the founders of the major religions. Well, one, Abraham and Moses, and even Jesus Christ as well, are all the same religion. And Krishna, he is considered the 8th or 9th avatar, which is like manifestation, which is like incarnation, of Vishnu. So before Krishna, you had Hinduism already. He's not the founder of Hinduism. And consider this. Abraham, Moses, and Jesus Christ, they all teach the same thing together, but those 3 and each of the others, Krishna, Zoroaster, Buddha, Muhammad, the other 2, each of them all teach something contradictory to each other. For example, Jesus Christ said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Buddha said, reach enlightenment, get rid of desire, and you will be freed from a cycle of misery, i.e., reincarnation. Now, how is any of that the same thing? Moses said there is only one God. Krishna is part of Hinduism, which says there are many. Now, how can all these men who, except for Abraham, Moses, and Jesus Christ, compared to each other, how can all these men teach contradicting things and yet all be presenting the same revelation? Or a progression of the same revelation. That's not possible. At all. So as you can tell from this religion, their heresies are omnism, pluralism, and, could not be more obvious, syncretism.